Hey, Kansas City business owners making $100,000 or more per year. This message is for you. You work hard, but let's be real. Your finances, they might be a challenge. You're spending hours drowning in receipts, guessing what to enter in QuickBooks, and stressing out over taxes. And here's the scary part. If your numbers are wrong, you could end up paying way more in taxes this year, or even worse, getting hit with fines from the IRS. But you don't have to keep doing this alone. Silverstone Bookkeeping has over 16 years of experience and has helped over 50 businesses clean up their books and avoid costly mistakes. They know how to fix the mess fast so you can focus on growing your business. Right now, Silverstone Bookkeeping is offering a free 15-minute review of your finances in QuickBooks, where they'll review your setup, identify issues, and help you keep more of your hard-earned money. That's a $150 value, free for the first 5 listeners of Kansas City Business Cast. You heard me right. Silverstone Bookkeeping, with their 16 years of bookkeeping experience, is providing a special offer to check your QuickBooks setup and ensure everything is in order for 2025. If your business is making $100,000 or more per year, do not wait. Call Silverstone Bookkeeping at area code 913-732-4151 or visit silverstonebookkeeping.com to book your free audit today. You grow your business, let Silverstone Bookkeeping handle the tedious financial tasks. Welcome to episode number 40. Technically, we are in season 4 now here on Kansas City Business Cast. Again, I say it all the time, but if you like what we're doing here, we need to see your support via subscriptions, likes, shares, comments, ratings. If you've got Spotify and you've listened to a couple of episodes, that means you're eligible to rate. Please give us a 5-star rating, okay? If you own an iPhone, that means that you have an Apple ID, and that on Apple Podcasts, if you listen to us there, I know about 56% of our listeners, y'all listen to us on Apple. Why haven't you left us a review yet? Go ahead and leave us a review, please. That helps us with getting us up in those search results. And just since I've got a podcaster, a fellow podcaster on today too, in fact, while you're at it, maybe you could just go on a rating and sharing and liking spree for all of our other local podcasts. Show them some love here in Kansas City. All right, now that I got the spam out of the way, I'm very excited to have my guest on today. I got Gabriel Garcia from To Bring About Podcast in the house. Gabriel, how are you, sir?
I'm doing good, Michael.
I'm
how
doing
are
so
you?
good, man. I have been so excited. I've been geeking about this conversation. I, just kind of tell the listeners how I found out about you. And I think this is why it's so important, too, to stay consistent, because you've been at this for a couple of years. And when I saw you with John Little on I-70 podcast, I was like, where the hell has this guy been? I went to your podcast page. I went on your YouTube channel. I saw some of the guests you were interviewing. You're interviewing jiu-jitsu practitioners. You're interviewing historians. You're interviewing, local folks. And I got to see some of your episodes and some of the things that you said on I-70. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this dude is so legit. And I was so glad that I found your podcast. You're at episode number 54 now. I had the honor of coming out to your studio and being on episode 50. Thank you again for that. But man, you are one of the most consistent dudes in the city. And what I've enjoyed and appreciated about getting to know you too is that I can see you genuinely love talking to people, which you got to do these podcast things, right? So, man, mad respect to you, Gabriel.
Yeah, no, dude, I super appreciate those kind words, man. Yeah, I started the podcast with Purple Pill back in like 2021, I want to say. I might be off on dates here, so don't hold me to them. With a couple of buddies of mine, we had a great time, man. It was a conspiracy-based podcast, which, I say conspiracy, but, everything that we were talking about was pretty pretty 100% accurate, now that all the information's all coming out. But I had a good time with those guys. Kind of went our own ways. I always had a podcast idea that I wanted to do on my own, and just never got the ball rolling. And because I was so busy with the other podcast. So once that, we kind of parted ways on that, I started on mine. Did one episode. I think I told you about this story. Did one episode in like 2022, I want to say. I can't remember when I dropped that, but dropped it, completely ghosted. I started a new job and just kind of consumed my life at the time, and I was really beating myself up about it, man, because, for being the first episode on my own, I thought it went fairly well. I interviewed one of my best friends, Rafael Aguirre. He's a business owner, and I didn't want to necessarily go down the podcast, like doing a podcast in the way of only discussing business, but also seeing the person behind the business as well. Because, discussing, stuff about business, it's just not my forte. It's just not, I can, hold a conversation a little bit about stuff like that. But what I was more interested in is I wanted to know the person behind it, because I found myself always wanting to know more about people. I found them very interesting. I mean, it didn't matter who it was. I'd meet somebody at Target or something and just kind of talk their ear off. And so I kind of was like, man, what's a good place to do that? Starting a podcast, people are there because they want to talk. I'm no longer holding up the family anymore. An hour at Target talking to somebody that either I used to know or,
hey,
or
you
somebody I
talkers
just
out
started
there,
a conversation
you talkers
with.
out there, man, create a
Yeah.
podcast, bring it inside. I love
Yeah.
that, dude.
And so like, yeah. And so when I did that episode with him, it was just cool, man. It's crazy because, he's been my best friend since I was like in my teens, and there was things that I didn't even know about him. And I realized that putting the phone down, putting the distractions away, and being able to sit in a setting where you have 2 to 3 hours to really get to know somebody, it was powerful, man. I mean, I've learned stuff about him and his family that I didn't even know, where they had, I knew where they had came from, but I didn't know what type of jobs they had. They were picking, I think it was cherries or apples or something like that, like where they thought about migrating to once they came into America. And it was so cool, man. And to hear his upbringing, things I didn't know that he had to endure and go through. And it really just put in perspective of like, people's stories from the past really show you why they are where they're at currently, and then in this conversation of kind of going through your past, this conversation that we're having may be able to help you create a better future, and I'm not trying to be a cornball at all on this, but and a lot of people that have had these conversations know, and or listen to podcasts know, it has made us a better person. It has kind of humbled us and showed us things that maybe we didn't realize about ourselves. And once you start repetitively hearing those things or seeing these stories of people bettering their lives and becoming a better person, you want to jump on that train. It's a trend that I believe we need to start more of. The trends that I'm seeing out there a lot, it's just the popular trends. It's all trash. So I love that podcasts are becoming big. I love what they do for people. I love what they do for myself. And I'm sure you feel the same way. So that's kind of why I got that started. And then once I got over that hump and got back on the ball and started releasing, I think about a year later, I started putting out more content, which was some of the early episodes are a lot of test episodes that I actually ended up releasing because I was kind of getting into a rut to where I was like, man, I don't know. I am not finding guests. I don't really know what to do here. So I kind of just gathered up friends and brothers and I was like, hey man, let's shoot some stuff. And if we like it, we'll throw it out. And I sat on it for a while and didn't want to send anything out. And then finally I was just like, fuck it, man, let's throw it out there. And so I throw it out there and it didn't, it doesn't hit like you think it would, you think it's going to kind of get a little more traction than what it was. It's kind of eye-opening. It was very eye-opening when I threw it out, but it got the ball rolling, which, ended up with me getting more people on. And then it ended up with me having the courage to reach out to people and ask them, would you like to come on this little platform of mine that I've built and sit down and talk to me? And people that didn't even know me, you know, one of the first ones was Brock Bristow, and he came on, had no idea who I was, did me a huge solid. He was like the first one that I was just like, I'm going to start sending out DMs to people I don't even know and see if they want to,
Man, so
chat.
there
So,
so
yeah.
many nuggets in what you just said. First thing that occurred to me was, when you talked about, the trends and all of that, and having real conversations with people in an extended format, which that's the thing that another thing I love about to bring about is you got, 1.5 hour, 2.5 hour. Our episode was 2.5, almost 3 hours. You're talking to people, and it's amazing to me that the top podcasts in the world. So Joe Rogan's number one, Sean Ryan's number two. Both of these dudes have these long form podcasts, and for all the people,
They kind of battle back and forth for
and
first
so
place.
for all the people who say like, oh, that's too long, it's like, well, obviously people who want to listen to podcasts are going to invest the time. The second thing in what you said was, well, I guess it's based off the trends there, but there's that old Oscar Wilde quote, everything that's popular is wrong. And that is part of why I started KCBC. I told you about this on my show, on the episode I did with you, of like, everybody worships the New York Times bestseller. We need to look at our local heroes, local business owners, get to know them, so that, when you're out in your community, you're like, oh yeah, that's the person who owns my favorite bakery, and their kids go to the same school mine go to, and they're a part of this other, weekly group that I might be interested in, and you find that out about them. And the other thing too is that what I love about you, man, is you are action oriented. And I love how you said basically in that timeline you took a year off, or there was a year of trying to figure things out, and you just started releasing those earlier conversations. There's this concept of, don't wait until the iron is hot, make it hot by striking, right? And so you have to actually have activity, and you have to do something to get to where you are now, where you have this, you've got basically this locomotive consistent freight train. I mean, when I went and saw you in early December, you're booked out to February, right? And so, you get people that will come along. So so many different directions we could go in that. But I guess, just from the foundational level of doing the podcast and what you've learned in that, you did your first podcast, you got to bring about now, which is the, kind of the next iteration, right, that you're working on. What have been some of the things that you've sort of learned about operating? Let's focus on that, like operating the podcast, right? Like all the scheduling, the research, the editing. I mean, the fact that you edit from 3 cameras, that is not for the faint of heart, right? Like all the operational stuff, man. Like what has been like, I guess the lessons that you've had in that?
Discussing the long form podcast like we did earlier, they're trending now. People are liking them, but what comes with that, doing these long form podcasts, is trying to make sure that every bit of that 2 to 3 hours is interesting. So that's been a tough battle. I'm not naive to think that all of my 2 to 3 hour podcast, every single minute of it, is interesting. I understand that they're not going to be. I think in any type of conversation, even off camera, if you're talking with somebody for so long, not all of it's going to be as interesting, and it's going to depend and vary from person to person. So getting better at prepping beforehand, notes, ideas, stuff like that, I'm trying to get a lot better on.
What's your process?
It takes time,
what's your
man.
process like that?
So usually when I have a guest on, I will do about a week to a week and a half, depending on who the guest is, of combing through the internet, finding anything that they have out there. If they were on prior podcasts, I'm going to listen to them as much as I can. I'm going to try to think outside the box while I'm listening to those conversations, not necessarily using the exact questions that they are asking. The questions that are popping up in my mind, I'm going to ask from what they were discussing. So I'll do that. If it's somebody that has a specific background, I'm going to go through a YouTube rabbit hole of similar content. So I'll do that. But yeah, man, that's pretty much it. About a week prior, I'm just listening and reading and looking at a lot of things, bouncing ideas off of some of the close people that I have, through messages and stuff, getting ideas off of them. But pretty much that's how my process works before somebody comes on the show.
I love that, man. I love that taking that
Yeah.
angle, how is this going to be different, right? For them coming on your show, right? And how do you do that?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, because we don't want to have the same episode. I don't want that at all. Are we naturally going to ask probably the same questions for sure? But I have my following, you have your following, other podcasts have their following. I don't think it's a big deal. For instance, me and John, we had on Cindy from the Self-Love Model podcast. We had her on fairly close, a couple of weeks apart, actually. And I feel like my podcast was actually completely different than the way he set his up.
Too.
And when I was
listening
listening,
to both.
Yeah, when I was listening,
I did you?
Dude. Okay.
Yep.
And I appreciate it. And it's funny because I had the feeling of like, man, we've talked to her so close. I didn't think he would, necessarily ask the same questions. I didn't think he would do that. But it's like when you listen to it, you're like super thrown off. It's like, holy shit, John, like you took a whole different approach. Like even some of the questions, I was like, damn, why didn't I think of that? That's the cool thing. So we're all kind of doing our own thing and possibly interviewing the same guests, but we have our own style and our own way of interviewing them. So I think that's pretty neat.
That really hits close to home. First off, you both did an outstanding job talking to Cindy. And for anybody listening, go check out Cindy. Yeah, it's YEH. Yep. Yeah, go check her out. She's doing some incredible things. I love how on her podcast, she actually, because she's a photographer, she actually does a photo shoot for the models that she has on, and she's doing some new and interesting things. I will never forget when I first started this podcast, and I know you probably did the same thing before you started to bring about, but you do the research of, is anybody doing this in my area or in my space? And I started researching, and there were other business-oriented podcasts that had started up in Kansas City, but at the time, and I can tell you, this is like mid 2023, early 2023. Most of them were about sports, which I've heard you talk about in your research you found. A lot of them were from realtors, and anything that was business related hadn't been updated in a couple years. And so I'm having this conversation. This is also while I was building my business, and I was talking to somebody, and it was funny. This was kind of like I think they were trying to give me a reality check, but I switched it back on them. At least I think I did. But they basically told me that if I was going to interview everybody that everyone else was interviewing, I should probably get a different podcast and I should do something different. And my response was, you should probably listen to my podcast before you start giving me feedback on my podcast. And I said, the second thing is, I am going to bring something to a conversation that nobody else can bring. And I understand that you think that may sound arrogant, but there is no other Michael Reisinger. And I say that to you as well. There's no other Gabriel Garcia. There's no other John Little. There's like anybody who gets to know you guys and watch your show too. It's like you guys bring your own perspective. And you also, the thing that you do too, is you shine a light on a different corner of people that no one else is going to be able to do. And so I feel like that's something people need to hear as well, is that, if you're trying to do something and you feel so passionately about starting a new thing, but you're getting all this doubt, and there's people who maybe out of their own insecurities, you and I talked about this, about how like criticism sometimes comes from insecurities, you will never know unless you actually start that initiative, unless you kick it off. And that's the thing. Like, I would rather go to my deathbed knowing that I actually gave some of my crazy ideas a chance versus living a life scared to not do it,
Yeah.
And so
no. Yeah, I completely agree. Even Mario Garcia with the Big Mod cast. Yeah. I've been on that one too. He even has his own style, the way he conducts his podcast. So you're right, man. We're all doing our own thing. It's all working. We're all in a big group messenger. We've all discussed pretty much there's enough out there for everybody. There's no reason to have this competitive mindset with one another unless it's healthy.
Yeah, absolutely.
But there's no reason we can't all work together in order to boost each other up and, like we've discussed, kind of create this little universe of ours to where, hopefully we keep going, we keep, bringing each other up and helping each other out. More people want to join and kind of join the movement that we're trying to create here in Kansas City. Because like you said, with these other podcasts out there, with these sports and all this stuff, they're great, man. I'm not going to knock them. A lot of them I've seen out there, they're cool. I just wanted something a little more independent on my end. I started to see that, some of these podcasts that have certain sponsors are kind of pushing certain agendas, and so I wanted to give a voice to people who aren't tied to that. And, when you come on my platform, I don't have any of that. You can say whatever you want. I'm not going to judge you, even if it's wrong. Later on, if somebody calls us out, we can talk about it. I think that's one thing that people, they get so worried about, is being wrong. We're all wrong at some point, man. The thing is to humble yourself and admit when you're wrong, and move on and grow and learn from it. So that's what I'm hoping to bring out of the podcast.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed that too. And about the movement that's happening in Kansas City as well. The conversation I mentioned earlier about the person telling me basically like, they were saying it in so many words of like, your podcast sounds like every other podcast. And I think this person's stationed too in Kansas City. Again, I avoid saying names because I feel the David Goggins, I don't want to take food out of somebody's mouth statement about talking negatively. I do stand by that. But I feel like this person's station was, I'm talking to this newbie podcaster, this guy, Michael. He thinks he has a great brand new idea, and it's not, and I get that sort of pessimism. But the thing that I've talked about with Kansas City Business Cast is that the reason why it's not just for Kansas City is because if you are in another part of the country, like I don't care if you're in Des Moines, Iowa, if you're down in, Lubbock, Texas, or, San Francisco or Los Angeles, or like Ojai, California. Like, this is something that is going to be good for any city, right? It's going to be good for any region. When you start getting local conversations and start shining a spotlight on the people who haven't been on a TED Talk, who haven't written a New York Times bestseller, but their story is freaking incredible. Like, it's just amazing, because I feel like it also helps us get our eyes off of like looking up and putting people on pedestals, because we've learned too, especially like since the pandemic, like my wife and I, we have this saying, all of our heroes are dead, because everybody that we've kind of looked up to or quote idolized, which is also the danger in really kind of like that hero worship that happens with people, is they're going to disappoint you. They're going to show you they're human. They're going to show you that they changed their mind. And so
that blue check mark
dude,
worship.
And so we do our best. Like when we start talking about a certain author a lot, we will check each other and say, hey, you know what? Remember, including Jocko Willink, which I feel like is one of my guys that I kind of look to, just because of the whole discipline equals freedom and how huge that's been in my life and with my weight loss. And, I mean, for all I know, he's a big part of too why KCBC exists, is just hearing these guys, these inquisitive, curious dudes talking on shows and having interesting people on has inspired that.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that you can't take anything from the blue check marks. I'm not saying that at all. I have a podcast because of people with blue check marks. Rogan was a huge inspiration to me. A lot of other podcasts, TFATK, Sean Ryan, all these other podcasts. I mean, I've been listening to them since like 2012, They played a huge influence on my life and have helped me turn into a better person. So them being blue check marks, I'm not trying to belittle them or degrade them. I'm just stating a fact of like, there's so many interesting people here in Kansas City that don't have that and don't care to have that. And I want to recognize those people. And I'm not saying specifically this show is for that. I'll have a blue check mark on anytime. I've had some on. But I also would love to hear from just, guys like my friends. I got my buddy A.D. Garcia. Like, he's such a talented individual,
dude,
man. And interesting dude. If people met him and got to see the work that he does, I mean, dude, this man he cut my hair today. You know what I mean? Like,
And he works on motorcycles, right?
When my barber didn't pick up his phone. Yeah. So, and if you're listening to this, bro, you didn't pick up your phone. I had to cheat on you with another barber. But he can ride motorcycles. He can cut hair. He makes cool ass woodworking and painting, and he does tattoos. A lot of my tattoos he's done. He just does a lot of cool shit, man. And you would have never have known from a dude who just has a regular 9 to 5, you know? And it's so frustrating because I try to push him so much to live off of his hands, you know, like what he can do with his hands, he could make money off of that. And, you know, he's just, sometimes he's almost, I feel like, too humble, you know? It's like to the point to where he doesn't even think that he deserves to have that life.
Sure.
And he worries too much. And I get it, he has a family and stuff like that, but man, this guy is, I'm telling you, like, if he really wanted to and really took the time to like zero in and commit to it, he would be up there with all the greats. And you know, those people who are, I want to shed light on, I want to talk to, I want to see what they're about. And
well, let's talk about that, right? So there's two avenues I want to pursue next. Okay, we're going to talk about the 9 to 5 and how important that is, and talking about finding purpose through that, right? And then also building your dreams while you're doing a 9 to 5. But the other thing is too, I want to talk about toxic humility. So I started this. It's funny. I had Cam F. Awesome on my show, and his perspective on humility, it really rocked my world. And I'll tell you about how it happened. So, like, you know, he was on that Netflix documentary. He was on the Olympic boxing team, and he, through his journey, addresses humility in this way of, like, you know, basically, I think, I'm not going to put words in his mouth, but the way he hit me with it was humility is bullshit. Okay. And the way it happened was I was texting him and I said, I can't wait to have you on my humble little show. And I was reading his book at the time, which is called Becoming Awesome. And he said, you need to keep reading my book. He goes, I can't wait to get on your badass podcast. And I saw what he did. He checked me, right? He checked me in 2D, two-dimensional stuff, right? And so part of this journey is that you actually have to promote yourself. You actually have to say, you know what? I think my shit's pretty hard. Like, I think I'm pretty awesome, and I think I can create a pretty awesome experience for my guests. And I think it's something that other people will think is awesome. So how do you walk that line, bro? And again, another thing about me is I don't know that I believe in balance. I think balance applies, but I also see myself trying to balance things that will never kind of be in balance. And I feel like that pursuit is futile. But how do you walk that line of having humility? Because I do. And I've gotten a little exchanges with him about this, about, well, what about this in humility? Well, what about that? Because it was funny. It was like, for whatever reason, God put him in my life at the time, and we did that episode to talk about that subject so that I could check myself. And I learned about this. I call it now toxic humility, where it's like people want to make themselves so low that, and I'm not saying that this is what AD Garcia is going through either. I don't want to make that connection at all either. But I do see that. Yeah. And I've seen that times in my life, like in jobs and with this podcast sometimes, where I'm like saying, you know, oh, man, I just really wish more people listen to it, or, you know, or like, I'm just not special. There's these sort of, do you know what I'm saying? Like it's a toxic level of humility. Yeah. It's almost like the inverse of where you need to be when you're doing a podcast. So
think even AD would admit that, you know, I deal with that as well. You know, because this is all new to me. Prior to this, I was a very quiet individual. Around my friends, I was very open, but, you know, out in public, I wasn't trying to seek attention. And honestly, I'm not trying to seek attention now. Do I want people to tune into the show? Yeah. Am I going to force anybody? Am I going to try to sell myself in order to get views or people to listen? No, I'm not. I would rather have a small platform of 500 people than a large fake platform of 200,000. You know, that's just not me. But yeah, man, I deal with the same thing. Even last night when I put out a post that, you know, you've seen, of some photos that I was taking and trying to promote more of me in the show, put more of a face to the show. Cause at the beginning, I wanted the face to be the guest, and I still do, but I think people need to kind of, get to know the host as well. And and have that relationship as well. So it's been weird putting myself out there. I've gotten great feedback, which, thank you to everybody. I mean, it makes me feel great. So yeah, man, I battle with it, but now I'm just kind of to the point. It's like, you got to stop if you want to grow and you want to be able to talk to more people and get people to feel more comfortable to come on the show. I got to put myself out there as well, just like I'm putting them out
Absolutely.
there. So lately I've been really trying to push more towards sharing content, putting more stuff out with me. And hopefully as time goes on, I'll get better and better at that.
Absolutely, man. Yeah. That's the thing is it is a journey that requires perseverance, and I see it show up in what I do as well. And I do believe that if someone put a gun to my head right now and said, where do you stand on humility, I would say humility is, we need to have it, right? Because we need to, when we start getting arrogant, right? What's the opposite or the inverse of humility, right? It's kind of, I guess, arrogance. Most people would agree. When we do that, we lose sight of where we need to grow. The people who have really good feedback for us, they stop talking to us because they go, oh, he's going to get offended or he's going to get chipped off by that, but yeah, I mean,
Can I touch on that real quick,
go.
Michael? That's one thing I did notice, and I want to put that out there. If there's anybody's trying to start a business or a podcast, one thing I've learned, the people that you want to have the support from are probably going to come last. You being a huge one, Michael, I didn't even know you, man. And I think you've helped support my podcast, more than anybody that I really know, other than my mother and my family, and, my wife and kids and stuff like that. But, and I've got a handful of friends, but really, I mean, you look at your Facebook, look at your Instagram, and you see the, 300, 400, 500 friends that you have, and, they all know who you are, and, you're only going to get a handful of them, if that, to be able to really get on the train and before it starts moving.
Yeah.
So I really want to give a huge shout out to you, Michael, because your energy and your positivity and your willingness to, I think, not be embarrassed by supporting somebody, and have that humility, and I think that's one of the cool things. And I'm starting to actually see it spread right now through certain individuals that we know, that we're all starting to kind of hop on that train now. We see what that positive feedback and that positive support is doing for one another, and it's addicting.
Absolutely.
And it's a good addiction. So I hope to keep it going, and I hope more people will see what we just discussed right now and let go of that, that arrogance, and just really, I'm not saying support if you don't like it. I'm not saying that, but if you genuinely are seeing like, man, he's doing something pretty cool, go ahead and support it, and it means the world to the creators of these businesses and these podcasts and other content. One simple like, one simple comment, one simple share can be a huge game changer.
So true, man.
For somebody.
Oh, thank you, brother. Yeah, it's no secret to anybody. I love to bring about, man. You're just brother from another
I appreciate
mother,
it, man.
man.
I love your show too,
and,
man.
The thing that I have told people is it costs you nothing. I mean, literally the thumb can hover a half an inch, and how, I don't know if it's difficult. I know too, like what we kind of suffer from as well is the algorithm, right? And I don't want to get into algorithm bashing. I've done that on previous episodes. I really think about what some of the local podcasters and influencers have said recently on shows that have really challenged me, is to say like, hey man, and you were actually the first guy in a long time that I heard this from. It was like, you awakened me from my stupor when you said 15 people, acknowledged the post. Imagine, and we were sitting in your studio where you're at right now, and you put your arm out to the rest of the room and you said, imagine if they were sitting right there. And I was like, yeah, that's right. If it's 15, it's 15. And when you talk about a like making a difference, I'll tell you what, man, when I get a nod from you or from John or from anyone else in our sphere, I go, yeah, that's my brother right there. Yep, they see what I'm doing, and they know that I see them too, right? And it's one of those things, and I will tell people too, it's like, I'm an introvert mostly, right? Like I've said, I'm not an extrovert. I'm more of an ambivert. Like I recharge like an introvert, but I can flip a switch. So like today, I'm talking to you for a couple hours here. When I'm done, I'm going to go, be quiet for a minute just to recharge. But like, it costs me nothing. I mean, I really like, if I pressed play, I'm on the page, I can follow them right now, or I can acknowledge that post, or I can do this thing. And it's something that I know too. The more we do it, the more others will be inspired to do it. And
Right. And that's my whole goal, Michael, is that was the reason why I'm trying to get all the podcasters together here in Kansas City, is because if we create our own, I keep using that word, universe,
collective universe.
Others will want to be a part of that. And I'm intentionally doing that, but I'm doing it for us as well, because we need people that we can bounce ideas off, people that we can help check one another. We need people to be able to support, give support when needed. So I think all in all, it's going to turn out great. We have the whole event that we're trying to get planned for this year in 2025, kind of like a podcast event type deal where you can come down and meet everybody and hang out and see other vendors and businesses if they want to come, and food and all that. So I'm really hoping that we can get a solid date in, start discussing that. And, I see that from there on out, taking off and people really wanting to kind of be a part, because, kind of like the post I put out yesterday, man, the guests and really the viewers and the listeners those are the important figures to these shows, and they're going to be the ones to determine whether or not they make it. These shows make it, and we're really hoping that we have more people come out and give input and give ideas and share and recommend guests. And so really the listeners and the viewers, man, they hold all the power, and, we're super appreciative of all of them. And I think my biggest thing is like, hey, engage. You have these platforms where literally if you message me, I'll see it, and I'll respond. And I think that's really neat. I think it's really cool that you have a platform that you can actually almost touch and be a part of and help grow.
Yeah, well, we've talked about too, about how podcasts, it's like, this is the new media, right? Like, this is the I'm trying to think of a new acronym, because I talked about most effective devil in America, MEDIA, the mainstream media, and how this is like the new way that we're utilizing.
No more television.
Yeah, man. Yeah, we do this video because video's more engaging, and people like watching people talk, and it is something we can cast on a TV. But
well, I mean more of the channels on TV. It's like the old Jordan Maxwell, when he kind of breaks down words, and television, is literally talking heads on the TV telling you what they are told. I guess I'll put it that way, what's in the script. And now that you have all these independent podcasters and more independent media coming out, there's two sides to it. There can just be complete disinformation, no difference than what we're seeing on, all the other major platforms, either locally or nationwide. They're doing it as well. So you can't just dismiss us because we're not backed by all these huge companies and we don't have a huge platform. Or smaller podcasts can be giving just the same disinformation as the big ones. So that's something that we can't stop in the end of it. That's up to the listener and the viewer to be able to watch, listen, and be like, okay, well, let me do a little more research on that. Let me kind of compare counter arguments and come up with my own conclusion on it. Would we love for everybody to have the access to the most accurate information possible? I would love that. I would love nothing more than transparency from, our government, from our news sources. It would make things a lot easier, but unfortunately, that's not how the world works right now. I'm hoping as the trend of independent media grows, I'm hoping more and more that we see a change in that. But, there's always going to be, off the wall people, people that just, aren't doing enough research. I myself know that I'm not always going to be right, but I'm completely willing to admit when I'm wrong. I have no issues with that. If somebody comes at me with information that goes against what I said,
Right.
Hell yeah. I'll say, hey man, I fucked up on that. I'm sorry. And we'll have a discussion about it. I love that. That helps me grow. I don't want to be right all the time.
No,
That's not my goal or
no,
objective. So
there's this evolution that happens when you process things with other people, right? When
right,
you
right.
I know you'd probably agree with me, but there's things that I've told people where, I didn't realize how brilliant or crazy or stupid or, asinine or whatever it was until I saw the reaction on their face. And it was with somebody that I trusted, a mentor or somebody that's like most of the time my wife, right? I mean, this dude, like you're married. Sorry, how it goes when you're
Yeah,
talking through and processing these things, it has the ability to help you to see things in a new light, which then starts to create new thoughts, new neural pathways, and then that equals action. And so, on the subject of just all the local podcasts and focusing on people who wouldn't have been able to be on a podcast otherwise until you asked them. And then this
exactly.
is
I
the
feel the
other
same way.
part too that's amazing. I've had guests come on the show and they've said, like, I'm so glad I did that. I almost canceled. I almost didn't respond. I learned XYZ from this conversation. It is creating this way for the people who are coming on as they're processing their thoughts with you as a host and like their guide through the conversation. They're actually changing and developing too. And that's the other thing that I would just say about, folks that are in Kansas City. If Gabriel or I approach you and ask you to be on this podcast, think about it as a growth accelerator, right? I mean, I've also had people like I've asked them, hey, what'd you think of the episode? Oh my gosh, I cringed on this and I cringed on that. And they focus on all the things they said that they wish they wouldn't have said. But that too is growth, right? And it's perspective,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, that humility that comes
That's
with
right. There's
that
that word
feeling.
again.
It comes. I've had it a ton,
Tell me
man. I
about some
mean,
of that, dude. Like, yeah, like,
dude, instances where I've wanted to crawl in bed, especially like from your 20s, man, when you're just out there not making good decisions and you're just like, man, I want to crawl into a hole and not come out for another
yeah,
6 months. So I totally get that, man. And even now, like you said, I edit my podcast, so I have to go and I have to rewatch them. Hopefully that's going to be changing. We're actually getting a audio and video engineer on, one of my buddies, Dominic. So
damn
he's going to come
son,
out and help out the show.
congratulations,
Yeah.
go Dominic,
Yeah.
dude.
So yeah, I hope it works out, and it'll help me get the show out faster, instead of waiting a
Dude,
week. So it'll be helpful, especially, I'm trying more to touch
yeah,
on,
cheers.
I'm trying more to touch on, more controversial topics, which, I've covered a lot on my podcast, but to be able to get them out sooner instead of hearing about them after they're already weak. And
Wow.
we all know how it goes in the world where one thing will happen and then next week they'll have another distraction happening.
Yeah.
So yeah, hopefully that'll help out a lot. But to the point of, conversations creating growth, I mean, it has a primal feeling to them, almost as if back in the day, when you're sitting around a campfire and everybody's around and they're discussing things, with one another. That's kind of how this is. Not necessarily everybody in the room, but like we discussed, 100 people watch. That's almost as if 100 people were in that room as that conversation was going on. So yeah, I think it's basically just, this is taking us back to those times to where we're able to kind of connect, learn, and
Yeah.
grow from that. And with that, it's not always going to be the most positive feeling. There's going to be some cringiness to it that you're going to feel. And that's just the nature of the game. That's, like you said, that's the humility that each individual needs. So I've felt like it. And I've say this many times, I'm not a saint. So anybody watching, don't think that I've ever, not had to experience that. I've experienced that more than enough.
Same, brother. Same. You just it just occurred to me. This is like the first time, man. This is an epiphany that's literally happening right now. But you said it's almost like being at the campfire. And I think of some of the most memorable moments in my life were, out camping around a fire with other dudes, or like with Daniel Mayares, who I had on the show, his birthday last year. He just had a fire pit out in his garage, his driveway, and, everybody could just come by. So Stephanie and I went over there, talked with him and his wife, Lisa, for an hour and a half about like everything. And it felt so good walking away from that. I've had firesides on my driveway, during elections when people in the neighborhood were divided on certain things, and we were able to process some of those things. And, being on a podcast, like even this virtually, it's like, it is very, very much like being around the fire, right? Like processing.
Yeah, Michael, I was actually
Yeah.
gonna tell you about that.
No,
Sorry,
go
I don't want to
ahead. Go
interrupt
ahead.
you.
Great time.
But I'm actually excited that I'm doing this because I've been so opposed to doing remote
Yeah.
podcasts because I've seen them. Yeah, I've seen them in the past, and I didn't like them, the feel of them so much. I'm more of an in-person type. You know how it is in person. It's a different
It
type
is.
of connection, different type of vibe. But I mean, being on here with you, I mean, this is great, man. I mean, the remote podcast game has definitely evolved,
Yeah.
man. And this is really neat and actually something that I'm going to incorporate with my podcast as
You're going to
well.
need
So
to.
I'm really
I'm
excited.
going to tell you what, you're
Yeah.
going to need
Yeah.
to, because
Yeah. Cause there's somebody 3 hours away in Missouri that I want to get connected with. And I can't, unfortunately don't have the money right now or the sponsorship
right.
to be able to fly people in or drive people in order to be able to
That's
interview them.
exactly where I was going to go with it. We talked about this. I think, and I truly believe in your future. I can see it so clearly that you're going to be interviewing, big time politicians, folks. I mean, you and I talked too off camera about some of the bigger name folks I've tried to get on the show, and so I
Yeah.
know that you and I are both, we're shooting really high, right? Like we're wanting to
Yeah.
get some folks with the bigger audiences on, and the virtual component, it's great. And again, I've told you, like, I want to get back into the studio because we had all those audio episodes we did in person. It's a different vibe. But, kind of switching gears here, we had talked about, what it's like having a 9 to 5 job. And so I think listeners of the show will know, like, I still run my business, I still run this podcast, but I have a 9 to 5 position. I would say it's probably one of the best decisions I ever made. The company that I'm with now and the team I'm with, it's great, but it is a time constraint. And for you having a point where you switched careers while having to bring about, and then also too, you have your 9 to 5, you have your family, you have your podcast, you record the show out of your home. What do you have to say to people about grinding with the 9 to 5, and what that journey has been like for you?
Okay. Yeah, I've actually switched jobs multiple times during this podcast,
Okay.
not just that one time. I mean, I've probably changed careers in the last couple of 2 to 3 years. I want to say about four
Whoa. Okay.
times. I've been going back and forth between project management work and back to machining, which is what I've done for a long time. So yeah, that's been a struggle. And if you watch some of my podcasts, some people may not see, there was there's a handful of episodes where in between that transition, the stress shows. I feel like, well, at least I can see it, or the preparedness for those shows show. But yeah, man, I mean, I just try to push through. I'm not going to be perfect every time I come on the podcast or when I'm sitting down with a certain individual. I don't think when it comes to normal conversations, anything is perfect. So I kind of just try to do my best, sit down with that individual, really try to listen and engage the utmost that I can. I'm one man team. I'm having to watch all the audio. Luckily that's going to be changing, but I'm having to do all that stuff behind the scenes that people don't see when they're watching. So yeah, I try my best, and then having to go, work as well. Luckily right now I'm back in machining, which has been a struggle. It's not something I necessarily enjoy. The way my mind is, I'm always needing new challenges, new things to work on. I don't like being in one place at a time. I like to be able to move freely, but it has helped me be able to prepare a lot for these podcasts. It gives me a lot of time to be able to listen to content and stay up to date with things that are going on. So that is a plus. I kind of got to pick my battles here, but yeah, man, I mean, I just dealing with that, the best I can, try to balance everything the best I
So
can.
how have you found purpose in that mundane, in the repetitive tasks at work? And I love how already you're like, it's giving me time to listen. And just so everybody knows, so being in machining, so like you have like say a Haas CNC machine, computer numeric controls machine, right?
Yeah. That is actually what I'm running.
Hey,
in the
that was my
Haas,
favorite.
so,
When back when I was
yeah.
in, I worked for a boutique mountain bike manufacturer in California, and I got to be in the machine shop for a while. And yeah, like it was a great time. I wasn't listening to podcasts then. This is like back in 2005, but I got caught up on all my favorite new albums, and like I mean, it was just yeah. You push the button, you walk away, you come in with the air hose. So there is a lot of quote downtime because the machines are doing the work, but you're inspecting them, you're
Right.
making sure the coolant's good, like
Yeah. You're doing setups and stuff like
right.
that. Yeah. I mean, so just a real quick breakdown
Yeah.
of machining, like, normally you're setting up all the fixturing prior and you get different types of jobs. Luckily right now I'm at a job where they're doing the repetitive work. So you're not really having to swap anything out. They have a huge pallet system. So everything pretty much stays load and go. So it's real easy work, and I've been doing it for, you know, damn near 13 years, somewhere around there. So it's pretty easy for me to do. Yeah, and it's given me time to be able to listen to stuff and jot notes and stuff like that. And depending on what you're running, what type of metal and stuff like that, whether or not you're able to walk away.
Right.
Harder metals like steel and titanium stuff, you definitely want to keep an eye
I
on
was
stuff.
always
But
in
yeah,
aluminum,
you're
so it
right.
was always like soft, and it wasn't
Yeah,
heat
yeah,
treated
aluminum's
either,
great too.
so it was
Yeah,
like it'd go to heat treat and
yeah,
I didn't
yeah,
care,
yeah, and yeah. And so, just depending on what you're doing, yeah, machining is a great trade. I would say the only thing I see lacking in the machining industry is that I would say conditions, work
Mhm.
conditions. I see a lot of that fail. Safety. They try, don't get me wrong, but a lot of the stuff that when you're going to these shops, they stink. You're breathing all that shit in. And just kind of that old blue collar mentality. They don't care. You're kind of you're acting like a sissy if you say anything. Not saying the company I'm at now, they're fairly good at recognizing that stuff. There's some things that they need to change, but yeah, I mean, it's kind of a dying trade, and I think it's more of because of, I want to say, pay being one of them, because it's a skilled trade, but not looked at as a skilled trade, which I find odd. They're more and more trying to make it automated, but you can to a sense, but I don't know. I find that you still need to have skilled labor in those positions. I think a lot of the youth don't want to do any of that type of work because it stinks. It's dirty. It's not like construction digging holes dirty, but you leave, you smell like coolant, you smell like metal, you're getting oils, all that shit. A lot of these shops, they're not running any type of air filtration systems or mist collectors. So you're breathing all that shit in all day. Who knows what my lungs look like? I don't even want to think about that. Yeah, so stuff like that. So people are kind of turned off to that, and when they can just go and get a good tech job, which I don't blame them.
Yeah.
You find what makes you happy. So, and it's not necessarily that machining makes me unhappy. It's just something I think I've just been doing it for so long. I'm ready for the next chapter. And a lot of the times it can be difficult to move up if you don't have that college degree. Until you get that piece of paper, you're not going to, tend to be looked at for any higher up positions. Unless, you're doing the old, making best friends with the people in the office. So in order to do that, a lot of the times you got to be a yes man. So, which I am not. I've never seen any good come out of being a yes man. Not saying you got to be a complete asshole, but I think that we all, like we said, we learn from challenges and people having different opinions, and to be able to come up with good solutions out of those. It may not be necessarily their solution. It may be a combination or somebody else's. That's when that, back to the humbleness comes in, to where you don't always have to be right, and, ego and stuff. I just see a ton of ego in a lot of those positions higher up. And, it's sad, man. I kind of see the same cookie cutter type people that end up in those higher up positions. And I'm not saying
Right.
everywhere, but it's kind of the same type of guys and gals, just very egotistical, very demeaning. And it's sad. It's sad that when people that have good ideas, or they're more soft spoken or more compassionate towards their fellow human beings, they get looked past, because
Yeah.
that could be an
Yeah, we
issue
kind of talked
for the
we might
company.
have talked about this a little bit too when we were talking, but like just because you're good at the job that you were doing before does not mean you should necessarily be the manager of, say, that department, and how
Agreed.
leadership is a completely different set of muscles. And there has to be, if people want to be effective leaders, if they want to win hearts and minds, if they want to win friends and influence people, they have to be able to display that empathy. They have to be able to, stay connected at least a bit so that they don't lose sight of what it's like to, say, work on the floor or the front lines or whatever. There's also this, what I've found in working with businesses is like when you see that type of stuff, like that behavior that you're talking about right now, that's like a pervasive issue that that's a sort of rot that can spread like across an entire company, right? And that's the culture. That's why
Yeah.
I've said culture is how your employees feel on Monday mornings. It's like that you want to do a gut check. You check in with all the employees and how they feel when they get the Sunday scaries and then when they walk in on Monday morning. And so with
Right.
you and you, the way that you have operated as a sort of change agent wherever you go, bro. And that's the thing too about you that I want to recognize is that I've noticed is like when you have guests on your show, when you went and showed up at Combat Cardio, and I think it was Mitch and Tiana had videotaped your experience, and when you go to Hilly and Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, and like everything you're involved in, there's kind of all these elements at play. It's like almost like the Gabriel Garcia experience. I'm going to say it's like you are connecting with people. You are, I think people, we talked about this on your show about how I asked you, do people usually look up to you at work? Like, do they usually try to bend your ear about things or get your attention? And they do. And you're finding yourself in this role where by showing up for and with people, you have this ability to help get them out of a rough spot or help them connect with others and feel like, gosh, this doesn't suck so much. And so,
Right. Right. And it took me a while to figure that out,
mm,
Michael. I wasn't the person that I am today 10 years ago. And I've changed over the years. I've changed. I feel like every 5 years I changed quite a bit. And so I was that guy who was an asshole, who could be very demeaning and very just don't give a fuck about anybody else and their feelings and all this stuff. And it took growing for me to really shed that off of me. And even now, I still deal with it. I'm not perfect. I still have my moments where, I'll say something stupid or I'll think something stupid, and I have to learn and check myself. And it's like working out. You're not going to get the body you want in 3 months. It's going to take years. So I'm still continually working on that. And I'm very fortunate now that I have that I guess you would say just the looking in the mirror ability, looking at myself and realizing, that I need to make changes. When it comes to work and stuff like that, I have noticed, through the years, people being able to come to me and talk to me and open up. And that's changed a lot because in the past, that wasn't the case. I was looked past, but I've noticed when you listen and to people and you really listen to what they're talking to, you give them your undivided attention and be able to speak back to them, ask questions and get to know them more, people will open up to you. People will look at you differently. And that's one thing I would hope that people in those positions that we discussed would do more. You recommended that companies should have people that are really good at their job in a position of leadership,
technical leadership.
okay, to lead the company. Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, people that don't have the leadership skills or the communicate or the people skills, we can still have them in those positions to where they're benefiting the company. But I like your idea of also having somebody like a left hand, and that person may not know exactly that trade to a T like that person, but he's really good at communicating with people,
Yep.
really good at hearing their side out, really good at transferring that information and those ideas from the floor to the office. I think a lot of companies are lacking that. And I would feel confident to say that there's enough money that those companies are making in order to create a position like that. I think if people looked at that more, I think they would stop complaining about turnover rates if they had those people in place, because you can't run your company like this old school mentality of people need us. They should be grateful, that they have a job. They should be grateful. Yeah, we are grateful. No one's saying we're not grateful. We're totally grateful that we're able to make money for our families and be able to eat and buy
Right.
things. But, you know, the economy is getting harder. Money's not being worth as much as it was. And then on top of that, you're still dealing with the same low morale that every company is dealing with. So if these companies were to come together and really start thinking about, instead of just a dollar, but the people that are the heart of that company that are creating those dollars for you, I think things would change a lot. And I think you'd see less of people bouncing around. And please, that does not mean a pizza party. But we need to, I wish companies would scrap that whole, hey, morale's low, throw a pizza party
Yeah.
at them. They got to stop
Well,
that shit, man.
those end up being a meeting for everybody to commiserate and talk about their misery over pizza.
Over pizza, right. And it's insane. It's like, you know what these people want, man. They'd like to be compensated more. I mean, more and more, I'm not seeing any bonuses being handed out anymore at the end of the year. And it's just these low ass 2% raises every year. And I'm not saying give everybody the same across the board. That's not what I'm saying. But if you want to see people want to be there, compensate them. We're not here at work because we want to fucking be there at work. We're there to make money so we can go live our lives. That's it.
I think too, like,
Mutual
one of
transaction.
the things of, you know, if a company, and I would do this with a company as well through VAS, like if I was talking to them and I say we come in with a situation like where, you know, there's somebody who's probably more of a great technical leader, and then there's a need for an actual people leader, not people eater. I just realized I said that. You know, the salary for an effective people manager is going to be anywhere from, like, you know, in a factory industrial environment, you're looking at probably like 90 to 120,000 a year. Some of these companies will make that that is literally a third of a government contract that they get. They can pay that person's salary for the entire year. And if you have the right people leading and increasing morale just by doing simple things like, you know, having one-to-ones with employees either every week, and if there's a ton of employees, do them every other week, and actually have a leader who can take negative criticism and say, I'm so glad that you shared that with me. Thank you for saying that. I can't guarantee a change within the next couple months, but I am going to take what you said and I'm going to remember it, because I don't want you to feel that way coming into this building. What eventually happens is the people, they feel safe because they are now giving their feedback and they're not being reprimanded for it. And then what they do is they start to actually bring up ideas and things that can improve processes for the company. You know, we've got so much waste. You know, I talked about the Toyota production system in Toyota on your show.
Yeah.
But once you create a safe environment for people to actually express their thoughts, but then also that leader that's going to say, all right, you're pissed about that. What do you propose we do about this? And actually getting people into the problem solving like method, if they can do that, I mean, again, it's like $90,000 salary, you know, for an entry level manager, or promote one of those people. You got somebody like I would go to somebody like you and I go, man, Gabriel, I noticed you're like the sage on the floor. Like, what would you think about being, you know, our operations manager, right? Since it's, you know,
Right,
this would be your first time being a manager in this company. Here's what the opportunity would be. You know what I mean? And so it is solvable. I mean, it really is. And I've worked for companies that have brought in new leadership teams. It's completely changed the game. Or if the board made the decision, but, you know, we're talking kind of pennies for some of these companies. I mean, truly.
I totally agree, Michael. And I think the thing is, let's touch back on the leadership not being able to take criticism. You have to think about, and like I said, and I want to reiterate, I'm not talking about every company out there, but I am talking about a majority of companies. The people that get to those positions are the ones that are going to give up family time, okay, in order to put in the amount of hours to get the recognition. They're going to put away, like, they're going to put on the back burner their hobbies, their life, all that. I mean, a lot of these guys, they pride themselves off of working 12, 13, 14 hours a day, you know, 70 hours a week in order to move up that ladder. because for some reason, and I know why, because they look at them as more productive, you know, they're going to be more profit, less cost, stuff like that. I understand that. But those type of people, if they're willing to do that, and a lot of these guys have families and stuff like that. You know, I've talked to some older individuals that'll tell me that are in their 50s and 60s, their biggest regret was putting their work first. And even though they got that CEO job or they got that leadership position that's paying them the nice 150, 200K a year, the connection that they have with their wife or their kids or whatever is gone. And that's something you can't buy back. And so if we could change our mind on that kind of change our mindset on that, on who we employ, those type of people, I think things would change. You know,
they're rewarding the wrong behavior.
This whole grind.
That's the wrong behavior to reward.
But it benefits them. And that's kind of what it comes down to. That's kind of the ugly side of capitalism there is. I'm all for capitalism, but the ugly side to it is it's make more, spend less. How do we increase revenue? Yeah. You know, for every company has that same mindset. When does it stop? Like a lot of they will create a position for someone who their sole job is to how to cut costs and how to create more profit. They'll have a position for that, but they won't for their, like the position that you were talking about creating to boost morale on the floor and get people to create this destination spot for
what you're doing is you're actually talking about two different things now. So you're talking about, you went to capitalism and profits, but there's also this problem of people rewarding the wrong behavior in these roles, right? And because you got somebody who's willing to sacrifice their family time, you got somebody who's, you know, I mean, I have worked for bosses like that. I've worked for people like that. I've also worked for people where if I was online after hours, they were asking me what is going on. Because if you're working extra hours, it shows, here's the other side of that coin too, right? Is like, and this is why it really should change. And if they hire these types of people, they should be the kind of people that honor the boundaries and the work boundaries. Because honestly, if they are working 70 hours a week, my question as a manager and with what I know and with consulting with companies is, why are you so terrible at time management? You can't get your job done in 40 hours, maybe 50 hours. It's taking you 70 hours a week. Why are you in here 70 hours a week? And again, right, going to like the leadership saying, I'm not impressed with that, right? I know I'm talking about another paradigm,
what I've seen,
but like that, the good companies, the ones who are doing it right, they are not rewarding that type of behavior.
Well, what I've seen too, Michael, is that that's almost not even, I'm not saying case by case it's going to vary, but what I've also seen is a lot of times, let's say a company that are out of state, but they own a warehouse here in Kansas City, they may be making decisions in Chicago for Kansas City and saying, hey, we're going to give you 2 or 3 more jobs that we would have had 3 individuals doing. That's going to be on your plate now. And so now it comes down to, in order to get your job done, you're going to have to work 60 to 70 hours to be able to complete it. It's almost not even a time management issue. It's more of that, going back to cutting cost. Oh, we can create those 3 positions. We can consolidate those into one, and that one individual can do them. And if they can't get that done in 40 hours, then I guess they're just going to have to work overtime. Or, you know, for salary employees, I see it a lot. A lot of the times their contracts will say 45, 50 hours, and you have to work that. And a lot of them work even over that because they have to get the job done, because they're not going to care whether or not your project got completed or didn't get completed because you couldn't complete it in that 40 hours, even though it was probably impossible. They just want it to be done. And that's all they care about. So,
Yeah, man.
So that's kind of the battle there on that.
Big time.
It can change from place to place, but you know, that's more of my thing though, man, is I just want to see more. I'm not saying you can make everybody happy, but I would like to see them more invest in the people, and we're just not seeing that. Don't wear your suit out on the floor. Go out there in the same clothes that they're wearing and talk to people, and you will hear, because they're not going to tell you how they feel if you're walking around in a fucking suit and, hey, you guys doing all right? They're going to lie. They're more worried about if they say the wrong answer that they're going to lose their job. And I think that if you can connect more on the floor and And like I said, compensate people more. I think really compensation needs to be looked at, especially in the manufacturing industry, man. They want to know why all this shit's going over to China and all these other countries is because nobody wants to do these jobs. They don't pay much.
Yeah, the labor costs in
And
China
you
are
can't,
so much lower,
yeah, so much lower, and which is horrible too, that companies would even do that. You're literally exploiting slave labor, and for what? For higher profit margins. Instead of the 8% you could have made here in America, you want to make 30 overseas. And that's another thing too, man. I've been seeing a big trend on that, even with small businesses. They don't want to make enough to be comfortable. They want to make it all. So in construction, I think usually a general contractor percentage on a job is usually like 8%. And I see guys trying to make 20, 30%. They're trying to make it all. And the way they do that is they hire cheap labor. It's a huge trend in construction. I'm sure in a lot of other different fields as well. And I think if we can get back and kind of get people to shed that ego and that addiction to the power and money and all that shit, man, and say, hey, you know what? I could live just as comfortable on a $500,000 salary than 2 million, and if I just put some of that money back into the company and the longevity for that company, I feel like would be a lot longer than it would be if you're just trying to make the utmost as fast as you can. I feel like at some point, then it's just going to all fall apart, or you're going to be continually having to use temp agencies in order to put bodies in your company. So like I said, man, and I'm willing to talk to anybody about this. I'm willing for people to give their feedback and opinions. I'm not a business owner. I totally get that. I'm just coming from the perspective of the worker. If you think I'm wrong, shit, put it in the comments, reach out to me. And really, I'd engage back. I'll have you on the show.
Yeah,
So
I was gonna say
I'm more than willing to.
You got a great platform to have these conversations, right? And on that subject, we've talked about what's next to bring about, and I'm just curious to know in 2025, what conversations are you wanting to have with folks that maybe you haven't gotten to have yet, or maybe you've been itching to have? What type of guest?
Okay. 2025, dude, what I want to focus on this year, what I've been really shifting. I mean, I've talked about it in a lot over the last year, a lot of things that are going on in the world right now, hot topics I've touched on, controversial topics. But this year, I would like to focus more local, things that are going on here in Kansas City or in the surrounding areas or even the States. I think that'll have a greater impact if I can narrow in on things that are happening around me rather than always focusing on, cyber trucks blowing up or,
Like
whatever
national topics.
New Orleans ordeal. Yeah. Now I will touch on those, but I would like to also touch on things here in Kansas City because I believe that we have the most power and we have the ability to change things more locally. Like when it's here in your area, trying to change things across the United States or the world, very difficult. But if we can change here locally and be an example, that could spread, to other places. So
absolutely.
So that's one thing I would like to do, whether that be politicians coming on or other just regular individuals like myself that want to come on and talk about things they see. Blake Wharton, he's been on multiple times.
Awesome.
I've tried to get him to run. I've tried to get him to run for office.
He needs to.
And I want him to, man. The sad ordeal is they make those positions to where I feel like good people don't want to run.
Yeah, but good people do.
I mean, there's really no money in it. I mean, there's a lot of bullshit behind the scenes. Wes Graves has talked about that. He's been on my podcast. He was a councilman for North Kansas City for like 6-7 years.
I haven't heard that one yet. I need to go back to that.
Oh man, you got to, man. The high school clickiness, left, right bullshit in those positions is insane, man. And they will, some of these guys are connected that are in those positions. They're able to, they make really good money on off their company that they've created, and they're able to do this, and they've got certain connections in the community to be able to get things passed. And if you're not with them, you're against them. So they're going to have a problem with that. And I would love to see Blake do something like that. It's just, unfortunately, good guys get drove out of those positions, and the ones who stay are usually the ones that, not always, but usually the ones that shouldn't be in those
Yeah, I
positions.
got a guy
So
around the corner from me that ran unopposed for a local seat, and he shared a bit about maybe he might be a good future guest for your show. I'll talk to him about this. But yeah, it is one of those things. I mean, we see that, when you get into public office, your family's kind of on the hook, and it's like people know who your family is. If you have controversial opinions, you're going to attract controversial people. It is one of those things, man. Who else would you like to see come on the show in 2025?
I mean, anything at all. I mean, if people have seen my lineup, it's a wide array of conversations, wide array of people. So anything, man. I mean, I just had a lady reach out to me that wanted to discuss the restaurant industry and things that are going on, in there. And so it's up in the air, If just reach out to me, let's talk. I don't believe there's really anything out there that I can't have a conversation about. And really what I'm trying to show is, going back on what we just discussed with Blake, him being a normal guy, discussing a lot of the things that he sees wrong in the community and what these politicians are doing and passing and things that they're ignoring. I want to talk to people like that. I want to see how you feel. This all goes back to the people that are living in the community. They are the most important people, okay, out of this whole thing. Not these dudes in suits, not these girls running for positions and council members and all, like not those individuals. They are supposed to be listening to the people that are living here in these communities, and they're not being listened to. And I know, and I'm not going to say it's an easy job. Surely those guys and gals that are in those positions, it's got to be a handful. It's got to be stressful. It's got to be a hard job. I completely understand that. I think there's ways to make it easier for them, but that's a whole nother conversation. But yeah, I want to listen to the people and how they feel and what they're going through. And if I can put that out there, I'm hoping others see that and maybe recognize that and hopefully listen, man. I mean, that's all I can really do. It's a shot in the dark, but yeah, I hope that people will come across it and see, oh, damn, they're really hurting. They could care less about this, name whatever hot topic right now that probably nobody gives two fucks about, but really oh, that's really bothering them. Oh, we were worried about that. No, you're in your own echo chamber. No one gives a fuck about that. We want to talk about this. And I think if I can show that, then I'll feel pretty good.
Absolutely,
about
man.
what my show's doing.
Which types of conversations have you been most proud about to bring about podcasts, man? I mean, I can think of, moments in my brief time with Kansas City Business Cast. I reached a year this past October, and there's definitely, like, I have my own personal Hall of Fame, not necessarily the people, because I'm so glad everybody that has come on the show has come on the show.
Right. Yeah.
But there's just certain conversations that I think back to and I go, man, if I could bottle that up and just figure out a way to bring that out of every guest in the future, that'd be awesome. You know what I mean? And it's just something about that, like, I don't go too far with thinking that and how to scheme that out, but it has gotten me to think about, like, future conversations and ways that I can try and bring more of that sort of impact out. Which types of conversations are you most proud about, or that, you'd like to see more of on the show?
I love all the podcast episodes. Everyone has been great. All the conversations are unique in their own, but kind of where I tend to gravitate to is a lot of the controversial topics that are a lot of the things that are going on in today's world that I feel like I have opinions on, and I would like others to come on and discuss them, and not even that align with me, that may go against my beliefs, and to show that we can sit down and have a conversation about it. I was just having a conversation with an individual at work who is a left-leaning libertarian. We didn't see eye to eye on a lot of things, but we had a very civil conversation, a very long civil conversation. And I'm not here to force anybody to think like me or to agree with me. I'm more of to preach. We can have difference in opinions, but at the end of the day, as long as we're not trying to implement those on each other and force each other to live by those guidelines or those rules or those laws, then I think that's the best way to go out of this whole thing. So I would say, like, a lot of like what me and Blake talk about. I love talking to Blake. I think that we touch on a lot of things that I'm very interested in. And also he's the type of individual to be able to talk to me and be able to, if he doesn't agree with me, explain why he doesn't, and not in a condescending way, which I hugely admire because I see that so much. I'm listening to that podcast you sent me, the Danny Jones, I think is what it's called. Yeah, Danny Jones. So I'm listening right now to Casey Means and that Jack Krause, that neurosurgeon,
Yeah.
and just the conversation back and forth between those two. I mean, Casey Means, I understand he's not fully answering the questions that, Jack is trying to get out of him, but to be so condescending, and I get it, we all get wrapped up in, sometimes in a heated debate, I totally get, but we would have less of this, man, if it wasn't for people in these government positions passing things and passing certain laws and certain regulations to where people must follow, or you're going to be slapped on the wrist from it. And so if I can have more of those conversations, that's kind of, those are my favorite, man, is kind of discuss those. And I'm even following a couple podcasts around here. I think there's like a KCPT. They have a podcast with like people from radio and people from news anchors and stuff like that. And, I watch them and I sit there and I kind of listen to the stuff they talk about. And I'm like, man, I feel like a fly on the wall. I wish I was a fly on the wall there to be able to ask questions like, what are you guys talking about? Or why are these even hot topics? Why are we talking about Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift so much?
You must be
and all these other
the local PBS arm.
PBS. Sorry,
well,
not
there's
KCPT,
there's
PBS,
a KC, there's a Kansas City entity that's
the guy, the English dude, the English guy that
I gotta look
he's
this
the
up.
You know what I'm talking
No,
about?
not the English dude. He has an English accent.
Yeah, he has an English accent.
Okay.
Yeah, he's got like a bald head.
I'm gonna have to look
I don't know
him up.
I don't know what which podcast that is. I'll send it to you when we get off of here. But just hearing them talk about things, I just kind of, they do a good job on a lot of the topics. Don't get me wrong, but just I see a lot of softball questions. They even had the mayor on. I've seen a lot of softball questions that they've thrown at him. I've seen a lot of softball questions they've thrown at other individuals. And I get it. They're under time constraints. They can't do a long form. Well,
Right.
they could. I know why they don't want to, but they could. I just think that I could ask a lot of, I'm not saying I'm going to have the most educated questions, but I'm going to ask you a question from a dude who lives a normal life and has having to go through these normal struggles that a majority of the population is having to go through. Whether or not I present it in a very lavish way or very educated way, I'm not going to guarantee you that. I'm going to ask you just like I would ask you if I seen you out on the street.
Well, here's the thing. That's why we really need to have some of these folks get on your show, man. I truly believe it. If you could sit somebody down like a mayor or a governor, attorney general, if you could get somebody and say, can you tell me about all the steps that you did personally to get here? And if you could change something, what would it be? And actually get somebody who can be honest, and kind of reflect with you.
Yeah, that's the whole flip of a coin, is whether or not they're going to be honest. So that's the flip of the coin, man. I mean, why is everybody, look at all these comedians right now, man. Look at Whitney Cummings. She was just on the New Year's Eve parade. A deal with on CNN,
bro.
She just dropped a bunch of bombs.
I love how she was like,
man.
is this still rolling? Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Andy's
I
me
was
a
surprised.
Hard look.
Yeah. Yeah, I was very surprised. Or Joe Rogan or hell, the guy I listen to the most, Dave Smith, part of the Problem podcast. I love that guy, man. You want to hear, and they are, I guess, quote unquote, blue check marks, but at a different level, I want to say. And they are showing that you could be a blue check mark and still be honest and still have real conversations. And we've seen it from all those types of people where they came out and said, apologized or said when they're wrong. And did they lose a following? Maybe a couple of people, but all in all, I don't look at Joe Rogan any different from some of the stuff he said that he's admitted to that he messed up on and go, oh, he's not right. I'm not going to listen to him. It's like, he's a human like me. He messed up. He apologized. Let's move on.
That's a great point, man. When you talk about the comedians, like I always think of George Carlin, right? Being one of the greats and one of the guys that really shined a light on all the ugly spots of society and was so honest about it. But yeah, it's kind of funny how like the comedians have, they kind of always have been, right? If you really look back at the history of comedy in America, And even in the world stage, like there's been a few British comedians that are really, I mean, really funny and really good at shining a light. But the importance of like free speech, it coming from comedians lately, and like I love Kill Tony too. By the way, do you watch Kill Tony?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I watch
My
Kill Tony.
gosh,
Hilarious.
man! I mean, everything that they have going on. You know, you talk about movements like. I think it was Shane Gillis and Adam Ray doing Biden and Trump was just, I mean, my
And do you ever see people fighting on there and upset with
no,
one another? Maybe every now
no,
and then you'll see, but a majority of people there, I mean, they say the most
the
craziest shit
wildest
you can
stuff,
imagine.
dude.
And actually shit that people probably say in the comfort of their home or around the people that they feel more trust with. Yeah. Or thinking, they put it out there. And look, everybody from every different race, gender, whatever you believe in, they're all there. They did that Madison Square Garden.
That was
And
wild.
there's a whole collective of people from different backgrounds, and everybody was there laughing and just being happy, and it was fun and the energy. And to go back on why the comedians are kind of taking the charge and leading the way, I'm not saying all of them, but a lot of them have stripped that ego. A lot of them have stripped or have gained that humbleness because they've bombed on stage. They've had to deal with people talking about their act and it's shitty and this, or being criticizing their whatever it is they're doing. So they've had to deal with all these things. The same thing people in martial arts. The one thing you get stripped away is your ego, and you become humble because you get, fucked up by some 130-pound black
Yeah.
belt, or hell, even a 6-month white belt choke you out. So stuff like that, like stripping that ego, I keep focusing on that because I think that's what's going to change. It's like a universal change. It's not directed towards just politics or comedians or the manufacturing industry or whatever it is that you do. It's going to help across the board. We just have to strip that. And if we strip that, I think the truth and real conversations and good things will come out of it.
Man, I absolutely love what you just said. That the comedians have had to bomb. They've had to. I mean, what was it Rogan was saying that comedians don't get good until I think 8 years in? He was talking about it recently. It was
It's a
it
while.
was with the guy he had on after Tim Dillon, I think. But he was talking about like how comedians, how it takes a lot of time. And you think about that.
Podcasters, Michael, podcasters. How long did Joe Rogan take to catch traction? In 2012, nobody knew who I was
Well,
talking
let's
about.
let's talk about that too, right? So you were talking with Esau from No Solutions Productions on your last show, and you talked about how long does it take to gain traction. I mean, oh my gosh, yeah, bro, you've got to go through a lot of rejection, a lot of like. If every guest that I asked or that stepped up and said they wanted to be on the show, if we would have secured all those, I'd be at episode 74. I'm at this is 40 now, and I've kept track not to haunt myself, but to say to myself and remind myself that like I need to continue to pursue people and know that not everything that I endeavor to do is going to work out into an episode, and it's not all going to catch fire, and it's more important to stay consistent. But with your original train of thought there too about how the comedians, about how they've had to bomb, and then transitioning that to podcasts, I mean, how have you?
Well, we do the same thing, right,
Yeah,
Michael? We get humbled, and we have to strip our ego because there's times when we're on here and we're not right, and we'll see it in the comments, or we'll receive a message, or somebody will see us in person and they'll talk to us. And that's something that we have to deal with week by week.
true.
And so, yeah, so you have comedians, you have podcasts, you have martial arts, all these things take a long time. I mean, hell, to be a black belt, a lot of the times it takes 10 years, for an average Joe to become a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And it like that shows you. So when you're stripping of the ego and you're becoming a humble individual, and it takes time to be able to acquire that. And, if we were to focus on those things a lot more, I think a lot of people would change, and it would be a lot better world.
Absolutely, man. On that subject, I mean, yeah, I mean, you are a jiu-jitsu practitioner, man, and you've got You got other hobbies like hunting. You've talked about your DVD collection, man. Like, what have you sort of found in your hobbies? How have those things changed over years? What do you do, man?
Right. Hunting, that's always been a passion of mine. The last couple of years, I haven't been able to go as much. I think I got out there this year a
Are you a
couple of
bow hunter
times.
or shotgun and rifle or all of it?
Both. Rifle. Yeah, I rifle hunt and I bow hunt, mainly bow hunt. That's, more of a passion of mine. I love bow hunting. I wish I had land. I don't. So, I have access to a couple of different areas that I've gotten permission. It can be difficult to make. It sometimes takes a little bit in order to set everything up and be able to kind of navigate and know where they're at or try to bring deer into your
Right.
spot. But, I've hunted on public land for a long time. That's a whole nother
Oh my gosh, dude.
story.
Yeah.
Especially after the last, I want to say 8 years, hunting has become very popular, which I'm happy about, but the public lands have gotten definitely
Big time.
oversaturated. But, so I do that. I ride motorcycles. I've got a YouTube channel called Mid-Map Moto. I don't keep up with it as much. It's more of a memory bank for me and a couple of buddies of mine. Carlos Medeiros and AD Garcia are one of my best friends. We ride a lot. We used to be in a club together back in the day. So we go out there, and I like to film our rides, man. I like to film the places we go and the funny conversations that we have and for hopes that, in 10 years, we can look back on it or whatever, and or our kids can look at it and see kind of the goofballs we were and the fun times that we had and kind of the camaraderie we created. So yeah, I've got that and the podcast, and it's starting to get a little hard to be able to do all these things.
Yeah, dude.
I've noticed that I've had to kind of pull away, even jujitsu, the last couple of months, I've only been going maybe once or twice a week. Before, when I was going 3 to 4 times, but that's life, man. I look at it as better to get some in than none.
Absolutely.
So I try the best I can and with what I got. But yeah, that's kind of how I recharge. Doing riding's a big passion of mine. I've ridden motorcycles for a long time. It's just something about that open road, man. You're sitting on that engine, 2 wheels, and a lot of people talk about this. And when I started riding, I see what they meant. Just hitting that open road, man, where it's just you and the bike, and there's no distractions. You got your favorite song on, and you're just rolling. And you look to your side, you got a buddy, you look behind you, you got another buddy or in front of you. And it's just a neat experience, man. It really does definitely recharge me and help me get back to kind of that Zen
Absolutely,
mindset.
man. No, it's so important. I think that's something that hits us as we get older, and especially with being fathers too. A lot of folks, man, will give up some of that personal recharge time or their hobbies in the name of
Yeah.
sacrifice. And I think too, it's funny, Steph's going to be talking about this on Motherhood in America, but this idea that sacrifice is part of being a parent. And, it absolutely is, but there's also this thing where we still have to have bro time with our dudes. We still have to.
Yeah. I live in a house full of
Hey, me
girls.
too.
So,
Yeah, dude, I'm the same,
so I
bro. I
don't,
got the
I
wife and
don't,
2 girls, man.
Yeah, same here. I got a wife and 2
Yeah.
girls, and I don't know. I love them to death, and we have a lot of fun times.
Yeah.
My oldest is getting older, and it's really cool to be able to be more of a friend with her now, and be able to have conversations with her that almost like as if I would have with an
It's a
adult.
trip, bro.
And so that's a really neat experience to be able to hear her ideas and her thoughts, and I would say I get her recharged, but in a little different of a sense. Living in a house full of all girls, I'm sure you
Yeah.
understand how I feel on that. It can be it can be different. I'll say
Yeah.
that for a guy.
I think too, like with my daughters as well, because I think I told you I'm on my road back to jujitsu. But
Okay,
my one of my daughters said, after a trial class, she's like, I want to do that. And she's a lot like me. She's very physical.
that's awesome.
And so
That's
her and
awesome.
I wrestle, and whenever I'd come home, I'd show them, De La Hiva, or it's funny
Yeah,
doing the moves with their little limbs and trying to show them how to get me. It was something that, I figured it out a long time ago, just being an older brother too. Like, it's so important for women to know how to defend themselves. And so as a girl dad, that was something I embraced. I didn't get I don't know if you ever watched Family Guy, but do you remember the episode when Meg was born? How Peter shows up in the room with all these like hockey sticks and footballs and all this stuff, and he's like, "Oh, it's a girl. Damn." I was not like that. Like I was like, "Okay, all right." My first one, it was like, "All right, it's a girl. Okay, cool." Well, they're going to learn how to defend themselves. They're going to learn firearms. They're going to learn, these things. And so I've also, had to respect the fact that they love playing with dolls. They love brushing their hair. But like before this interview, I'm up there with my youngest with this beginner's electrics kit because I want them to learn that too. I want them to learn math and science.
Yeah.
And, one of my kids is doing great with reading and math right now. And so I've taken very much a non-traditional approach where I'm like, okay, my daughters are going to know how to swing a sword and dance, because they got me as their dad. So,
Well, that's good though, man, because, and even on touching on the martial arts
please, bro.
deal with women, it's like, yeah, I'm a big supporter of women learning martial arts as well, but I also think that they should learn how to handle a gun as well, and protect themselves that way, because not saying martial arts can't save your life, it definitely can, but, being a woman especially and being, possibly smaller, I think owning a gun and learning how to use it is probably the most effective. Even as a male, me, I don't go out there in the world expecting jiu-jitsu to save my life. I carry a gun as well. I'm not, trust me, if you see me out, I more than likely 99% of the time have a gun on me. And it's not for, because I don't think jiu-jitsu will work, but the more tools that I have, the better off I'm going to be. I'm out in public with 3 girls that I have to protect, and I'm going to do anything possible to protect them. I'm not going to rely on just one thing. So that's what I would recommend to women, is that if you're going to get into martial arts, that's fantastic. I think jiu-jitsu is probably one of the best martial arts in there for anybody. Not knocking, Muay Thai or boxing or any of that. Those are all fantastic as well. But just from my experience with the jiu-jitsu side, that I've gravitated to the most, every fight goes to the ground at some point, or somebody tries to grab you in some sort of way. And it's just given me the confidence and the abilities to feel like I'm going to be fine in that situation. And then on top of as much training as I can get with weapons, I'm not going to say I'm one to be at the range every month, but I get in there the best that I can. And I think if you can do that, I think having those tools together is the way to go.
Absolutely. Well, it's a great equalizer, right? Firearms. And,
right.
It is one of our rights. And I think one of those things too, is I love how in the industry, there has been more focus on training, because that's so important, and I actually absolutely agree. I was raised with firearms, right? And so I don't have this fear that I've had to overcome in my adult years. Like so many folks that I know that have, like, after, a lot of the world events and things that have happened. We look too, like, I think it's Finland now. They're going to have 300 schools. They're going to start teaching firearms trainings to elementary. They're going to start in elementary school. Then they're going to continue with middle school.
Good.
Because obviously they're right next to Russia. And again, too, I remember what happened when just before that Russian invasion, you had school teachers and women training with AK in schools. And it's like, man, like, those folks were so unprepared for that situation. I know I'm kind of going a hard right there into that in the world events, but on the subject of people being prepared, that saying from the streets, you stay ready so you don't have to get ready. It's so important to take that seriously. And the more that we practice it and do it in a safe environment, because that's the thing too with like jiu-jitsu, right? Like you've talked about this on your show extensively, but like, just trying to choke each other out with other people where you actually can tap and you can learn, that's great. Because if, go ahead, dude.
That's what I was going to say, is that, no, like what you were saying right now about growing up with firearms, so it made it less scary when you were an adult and you owned one. I felt the same way with martial arts. I didn't grow up with any type of combat history. None of my family do any type of combat sports. I didn't wrestle. I didn't do any of that stuff. Thought I was a badass. Had that chip on my shoulder. Thought I was about something, and I wasn't. And when I walked into that gym at 10th Planet up in Platte City, they showed me that I wasn't shit in a very kind-hearted way. And from that, now I don't look at violence as this scary thing, because as before I was scared. I was scared to be in an altercation. I tried to avoid. I let a lot of people walk over me and say certain things or do certain things that I will no longer tolerate. And I believe training is what's going to get you over that fear. And if people, just because you've never had a history with firearms doesn't mean that you can't start training now. And training, not saying, like I said, and I really hit on this because I don't want people to think you have to be like one of these guys out there in the 511 gear and out there at the range once a week. And if you can get out there 2 to 3 times a year, and that's all you can due to financial reasons or time, or, you're the single mother that has to ride the metro and wants to carry a 6-shooter because there's crazy people on the metro half the time, and you're working 50 hours a week and you've got 3 kids at home, and the only time you can get at a range is maybe a couple of times a year. I think that's better than nothing. Are you going to be as efficient as maybe a person that's out there all the time? No. But what do we know about self-defense scenarios? A lot of the times they happen within 6 feet?
I think it's 6, 7 feet.
Very close range.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you can at least learn the mechanics of the gun, learn how to be safe, learn how to store it safe, all of that, I think that you're doing great.
Absolutely. And now there has never been a greater time in the history of this country than to find a group of folks. And there's classes, a lot of the local ranges, I'm not going to name them because they're not sponsoring my channel yet, but I am going to be talking to a few. But they have women's self-defense courses, women's pistol, women's tactical pistol. And, there's a lot. There's even a couple of big time influencers that have been on some of the national shooting stages or competed in tactical games that live in Kansas City that do these classes. They do concealed carry courses. USCECA, which is the insurance that, we have in my family, they have started certifying instructors and they're doing classes. And so the resources are there. And I think, the last thing that people are going to get when they walk into one of these classes is judgment. And I've seen it firsthand.
Right.
Like I know a lot of people in the community that do these things, and they're like, wow, you're here, your butt's in the seat. That's amazing. Like, hey, let's go. What do you need?
You want to know why people don't give you want to know why people don't give judgment, Michael, is because either they've been in that position already to where they had to endure and humble themselves and had to learn, or the person that has, like a person like yourself, you have a history of being introduced to firearms. You're not going to judge them because you wholeheartedly want them to learn because you've seen the benefits it's had for you. I would say too, as well, with the 2A stuff, women and men. If you're a man, and I said this on the I-70 show, and you're walking around and you're just hoping that the police are going to save you and your family if you get into an altercation, you need to really rethink what it is, your beliefs, because a majority of the time the police show up afterwards and they'll tell you that themselves. When it comes to defending you and yours, it relies on you. And I even have a quote on my arm. It's a pretty long quote, but one of the sections, or one of the sentences that it says is, basically that I'd rather be caught, with it than without it, in a sense. Like, don't let me be caught without my gun. I don't want to be in any situation to where I'm going to be thinking, if only I would have had it that day, and in order to have that mindset, you've really got to shift gears and start thinking about every statistic I see that people have ended up in that scenario. They didn't have a gun on them. Okay, so I need to start learning how to use a gun. I need to start, figuring out how to wear it, how to use it, how to shoot it. Because if you don't, man, I mean, we can all try to think that it's not going to happen to us, but look at those people in New Orleans, and not saying that a gun could have prevented that. But, if you happened to be the person that didn't get hit and he got out and started shooting, would you rather have the ability to be able to defend and have a fighting chance to shoot back and possibly end that threat? Or do you want to just hope that the police would have got there in time?
Travis Haley says there's a 1% chance that it could be you, but in that 1%, 100% of your survivability depends on that moment.
Right. And we're not trying to create any type of fear. It's just a reality. Sean Ryan has talked about this for 2025. He's had that Sarah girl
Adams.
You know, yeah, we've all seen that the border's been open for quite a while. There's been a lot of people that have came across that are just looking for jobs, but let's be real. There's also been a lot of people that are coming over to hurt people. And there's people here in America that are American citizens. Both of those individuals that, you know, the explosion and the people that got ran over, those are by American citizens. So there's people here as well that are trying to hurt people. And, you know, you need to realize that, because for 30, 40 years, nothing has happened to you, but it only takes that one moment. Look what happened at the Chiefs parade, you know, with the shooting back and forth between those individuals. And with learning about guns, you'll also learn about situational awareness. You'll be more aware.
That's the thing.
You know, when I was down at that parade, that was one thing I didn't want to go to, because I knew, and not saying I haven't been down there during a parade, I have, and I was there at the parade that year. I was more towards the River Market, but you start looking around, and you need to just be, your head on a swivel, watching people. And I still had a good time. At the same time, I was also, you know, had my 3 girls, and I was making sure I was keeping an eye on them and everybody around me. Is there a chance that I'm not going to spot something? For sure. But there's also a chance with me being aware that I could stop something. So, you know,
what you're saying,
it's a flip of a coin, but I'd rather be more prepared than not.
Well, with what you're saying too, and what you said, the guns are going nowhere. And at the parade,
even if you banned
parade, all the firearms used were unregistered. They were not purchased legally, at least by the people who had them. The whole thing about getting caught, people, it's funny. I was asked one time here in Kansas, you got that big dog. This is when we had our 115-pound German Shepherd, and, you know, you care so much about self-defense and all this stuff. And I'm like, you know, if you were from the hood that I was from, if you were from where I was, and you paid more attention to some of the things, like, you know, the average home invasion, I think it's 3 assailants now. And the tactic is hit the front door, people come through the back door, all that stuff. And it's like, it's not, the point I'm making here is, it's not paranoia if you're prepared. And you know this too. This is, you actually said it perfectly. You said you don't fear confrontations or disagreements or things anymore because you have this level of confidence. You also don't go around looking for it as well. And so when you're there in the parade, you're absolutely correct. You have more situational awareness. You also learn about what predator mindset is as well. And you think, there's actually exercises, and there's a great book. I recommend it to everybody who takes self-defense and carrying a firearm seriously, but it's called Violence of Mind by Varg Freeborn. And he's, long story short, one of the only guys who did, I think, 8 years in prison, got all his rights back to have firearms. Now he works with police departments and SWAT teams. And that book is just so great because he talks about, you know, the mission that, you know, we should have different mission sets. And so, like, for me personally, when I'm out alone and I'm on the freeway and a person cuts me off, my mission is to get home safe to my family. So that situation is water off a duck's back. When I'm out in public with my family, when you're at the parade, when you talked about, my main priority is keeping my family safe. My head is on a swivel. It is not paranoia because I have the balance of confidence and awareness, and we just know. And my wife now knows too, because we've learned that when we're both out in public, she's kind of got her role, I got mine, and our both is to keep our family safe. So she knows, if we're asking for a table at the restaurant, we want the booth in the back. If we go to a place and we're feeling crowded in the middle, it's probably time to get over to the side. There's just certain things that we've learned over time to where it is no longer paranoia. And to the person who does not practice this, has not made safety, you know, self-awareness a priority to their life, it sounds like paranoia. It sounds like, my gosh, well, that's an awful lot of work. And oh my gosh, I looked into holsters and I can't carry this with any of my clothes. And I mean, the excuse list gets longer and longer and longer. But what I tell people is, like, you know, the thing is, if you connect with people in your tribe that are having these conversations, you will learn. And if you read some books, if you practice it, if you think, that's the other thing too. How many scenarios have you thought of, Gabriel? I'm going to be going to this place. I wonder what their policy is on security. I wonder how many people are going to be there, all this. And you think about when you park, okay, that's where I parked. If something happens, I go here. This is not paranoia. It's our modus operandi.
I'm the type of guy, Michael, that when I sit at a restaurant, I'm facing the door.
Yeah.
Okay. Just like in the situation that we talked about at the parade, if I see two individuals arguing, I've been in those scenarios enough. Me and you have hung around the same locations, grew up in the same kind of locations. Fortunately for me, my parents took me out of those areas at a fairly young age, but I was still down there. I was still around there, still had friends and family down there. So I've been in these situations. I've seen when people I know they're about to do something, I can feel it. And I think people who want to bash people that own guns or say that you don't need them or say they're not necessary are people that have never been in those situations. So really, they should have no comment on them. I'm not here to make everybody carry a gun and tell everyone they need to. I would advise it. But if you don't want to, then that's your own, your own right. If you want to rely on the justice system, then go for it. But I would recommend you look at the statistics on that before you, believe it. So that would be my thing. And just, I don't know, man, I see everything getting kind of watered down, even in the jiu-jitsu world, sometimes that can be watered down. That can be a hot topic or definitely a debatable topic, but it's just, we got to stop watering these things down and more of look at them for what they are and the real life scenarios that you're going to be put in. I'm not going to pull guard in the middle of the street. When I'm training jiu-jitsu, yeah.
Bro.
Hey, I actually know some bad motherfuckers that would though. So I,
yeah, they grab the arm and drop.
Me personally, my coach John Monk might pull guard, but he's a bad motherfucker, so he could probably get away with that. I don't know if I could, but yeah, man, it's like anything that I do in life relates to a real life scenario. So even my training, ask the guys at the gym. It's like I'm always asking, hey, if I'm here though. And I keep them separated because I like to compete too.
Oh, that's cool.
So like I understand competition based and I understand, but I want to ultimately understand is the real life scenario. That's my real goal because I don't want to be hanging in the position that I'm just going to get punched in the face or kicked or kneed or, everybody knows in a real life scenario, I'm not going to go to the ground regardless anyways. I'm going to try to stay on my feet as long as I can because I don't know how many people are around.
Yeah.
So it's just stuff like that, man. Just being in tune, looking at these things on YouTube, look at these home invasions. I've talked to you. Go and follow Coleon Noir. He's a big guy that I listen to. I love that guy.
He's amazing.
He really, he breaks down and covers a lot of these situations. If you start watching this stuff and put yourself in the shoes of those people, you'll think differently. I know people who have gotten robbed. I know people who have had guns pulled. I've had guns pulled out on me. I've been in some crazy situations before. I've had to pull a gun out on somebody. Like until you're in those scenarios, you don't understand the fear and how fast things can take a fucking right. And do you want to be prepared or do you want to be caught with your pants down? Because I personally don't.
Not at all, man. Never. Yeah, dude. I just this is one of those things that I'm so glad that. And also referencing, I wanted to say when you said that on I-70, that was the moment where I was like, what's this guy's podcast? Where can I find this guy? And then when John was like, I was like, have I subscribed to I-70 yet? Because if I have not subscribed, then I need to, and I was just like, these are my people. These are my people right here.
And can I say one thing too, Michael?
Can
I say one thing?
We got time.
To the minority community, I really want to put this out there. Me coming from a mixed home, my father being Mexican and my mother being white. You even seen it on I-70, John being African-American and me coming from a different background as him. We both agreed on how valuable and crucial that owning a firearm is because color doesn't matter. You know what I mean? And I see this all the time on the news is them playing off the heartstrings of minorities, telling them that they don't need these things and these things are causing so much destruction in your communities. It's not the guns, man. A lot of the times it can be the culture, the lack of fathers in a lot of these children's lives. There's so many different scenarios, or even having good programs to be able to get these kids to stop shooting each other and killing each other. And I just think there's so much more that we can be doing. And you saying that guns are the problem is just a huge band-aid to an underlying issue.
Yeah, the comment I left on your guys' episode was we have a mental health problem disguised as a gun problem.
We do. Yeah.
And
it's a mental health problem and not watching our kids, man. I just watched a documentary literally explaining that there's a certain radius where all the shootings come out of. I think somewhere near like Truce or down in the 30s, 40s, that a lot of the gun crimes come out of the shootings and the killings. And it's like, okay, well then let's look at that instead of as a gun issue. What's going on in those communities?
Yeah, bro.
Is there something that are there other ways to eliminate this problem than just blaming this tool? And I think if we were to focus on that, we would see change, because when that documentary came out 7 years ago of all these dudes in suits talking about, oh, we're going to do this and we're working with law enforcement, do this and this and that, and then everything else but the actual issue, because it's going to piss people off if you say the actual, what we know is the issue. Okay. If we were to focus on that, they wouldn't have had another documentary 7 years later that PBS dropped again, saying how the same communities are still having the same problems, and it's actually gotten worse. And honestly, the only reason our gun deaths are low right now, our shootings have increased, the deaths are down a little bit, and that could be possibly because they don't know how to fucking shoot a gun. Imagine if they were more accurate. Imagine if they knew how to actually fire a weapon. There would be a lot more deaths, a lot more homicides, a lot more random innocent people catching stray bullets for no fucking reason.
Yeah,
so that's only my big thing, is that I see it in the minority communities a lot. And that's what was cool about me and John both agreeing on that. I feel like that's a step forward to others in the community of seeing like, hey, don't let the media lie to you and try to get them to play on the whole race card of, they don't need it, so why do you need it? And they live in it. No, there are a lot of people out there that feel way more comfortable with going to bed at night with the gun than without. So let's not, I get tired of seeing that over and over again. And I
really appreciate you saying that, man. And I mean, what I've noticed too is a lot of folks in the suits, they're surrounded by people who have guns that protect them. I thought it was so funny, dude, when I think Kamala Harris was talking about, she's like, I own a Glock. I have a Glock. And, and it was like this moment where I think she was trying to connect. Was that on Oprah? She said that it was just one of the most cringiest things, because, when I lived in California, she was our attorney general. I mean, I remember trying to vote for other people when I was in California, but it was this cringy moment where I think everybody in the audience and all of us watching knew, is like, yeah, but if you own one, you have not shot it in years, likely. And the way you're talking about it seems like, you're just really listing off the most popular gun manufacturer you have. But that, my point to make is that, a lot of the folks that say, oh no, society, you guys don't need this. It's like, well, where do you live? How many armed guards do you have around you right now? That guy behind you, that goon behind you, he's definitely not anything else than an armed hired security guard.
I don't live in a gated community, and it wasn't that long ago that I walked outside my house and looked up the street and seen a guy looking in windows of a house that was being renovated. Mm-hmm. So to tell me that I don't need, and I live in the suburbs, right, and the increase in homelessness has been a huge issue that I've been seeing in our area. And to tell me that, hey, Gabriel, you don't need a gun, I mean, you can go fuck yourself, because I will never agree with that. You don't live my life. You're not here keeping watch in my home. You don't have the responsibility of 3 women to take care of, 2 being children. So no, don't tell me what to do. And I won't tell you that you have to have.
Absolutely, man.
Okay. It's all choice. Freedom of choice.
Absolutely, dude. This, the point I was going to make, I came back. I just love talking with you, man. I so enjoy these conversations, but I was thinking about how, when you and John were talking, I was like, the way I describe this is it's warrior poet. It's like, you understand the applications of, violence, and knowing how to use it. Because again, like, it's that Jordan Peterson one that you and I were sharing about, there's nothing virtuous in nonviolence unless you're capable of violence. And you know, but then also just having this ability to actually speak and use our mind. And just, again, it's funny, John's probably going to listen to this episode. He's probably heard his name mentioned now at least 10 or 11 times. But one of my favorite quotes from Braveheart is, "It's our wits that make us men." And that's when they're trying to figure out how to attack the English. I think it's when they meet the Irish, and you got the crazy guy that's saying, "It's my island," you know. God, I get the chills, man. I got my Braveheart sword on the wall.
Movie. The Libertarian page just asked, "What's your favorite movie representing liberty?" And I wrote on there, Braveheart and
Freedom.
Patriot.
Yeah, both with Mel Gibson.
Yeah.
I have one of those Cold Steel Tomahawks too, that I watched The Patriot and I was like, how much does a tomahawk cost? And sharpen it up.
Well, because I relate to it so much, Michael, is because literally both movies are about, both are men who just want to be able to raise their families and be left alone. That's all. They don't want anything from you. They don't need anything from you. You know, they just want to be able to, I mean, fucking in Braveheart, he said it himself. He didn't even want to go to war. Right. He was like, nah, I just want to have my house. Until they went and killed his wife. We see this shit here in real life, just like that. It may be different scenarios, but it's the people at the top poking at the people at the bottom. All we want to do, we only have one life, man, one life. And all I want to do is to be able to enjoy it, live without you telling another grown man or a grown woman telling me what to do, and to be able to enjoy my time here as long as it is. I don't know. It could end tomorrow. It could end 10 years from now, but I don't need people that think they know best for me. You know, I understand we live in a civilized society, but if I'm not inflicting any harm on anybody, don't tell me what to do. That's it.
Absolutely, man. Dude, I have so enjoyed having you on the show, Gabriel. I love, we covered so many topics and things that I think I've been wanting to talk about on this show, but I've thought it's going to cause me to create another podcast to do this. And so, you know, I'm so glad that I decided to start having some podcasters and influencers. And to be honest, just some of my great friends that I've met in this journey in you, man, just coming on the show. Is there anything that you want to kind of tell our listeners and yours? Because I know a lot of your folks are going to be coming over to listen to this. Is there anything that, you know, we didn't cover that you wanted to make sure everybody kind of heard from you?
No, I think we covered pretty much everything, man. I don't want to, you know, if we tried to cover everything, this probably be a 5-hour podcast.
Yeah, someday we're going to do that. It's going to happen.
Yeah, I do want to say though, thank you, man. You have been a huge supporter. I totally appreciate it. I hope more and more people embody how you are. It's very positive, very uplifting, and I think it's really needed in this community. I love your podcast. I like how you're able to have these conversations and not just have it specifically geared towards one thing. All of this stuff kind of relates, man, you know, and I love you giving a light to people, just like Blake the other day that you had on, the guy that owns the gym.
Caleb, Blake, Body Shop, right? Jim.
Caleb, sorry.
That's okay.
Caleb, yeah, sorry. After a couple hours, I start losing a little bit of my memory here. But Caleb, yeah, he's actually coming on too. But like hearing his conversation.
I love that boy. Yeah, I love that guy, man. That's cool that he's coming on. Sorry,
yeah, dude. And your conversation with him was just great, man. I mean, you guys not only touched on business stuff, but also certain things that are going on in today's world. And I think it's really cool to see these people that own businesses and how they think about stuff and how they go about stuff, or even cool people like I spoke to you about, the lady that does the midwife.
Yeah, Clarissa.
Or is it
she's a midwife.
Yeah, Clarissa. Like that was a really interesting podcast. And I'm so sorry I'm bad with names. I've always been like this. But the other lady that does the one that we talked about.
With literacy, was it Becca? Yeah, Becca
literacy.
Pratt.
Yeah, Becca. Yeah, this all these cool people. You have such a cool lineup of people and just their stories and their businesses and what they're doing. I would have never known that was going on in Kansas City. And it's so cool to see. And I think Kansas City needs it.
Thank you, brother.
It's very generic, you don't feel like when you're watching it, there's a certain agenda behind it. And I think we need more of that content out there. I
appreciate you, man, so much. All right, everybody. So you heard from the man yourself. If you are not tapping in with To Bring About Podcast, go over, check Gabriel out on Instagram. We've got a link to all his socials in the notes for this episode. And as you know, as this gets released, we're going to drop like 3 more reels. We're going to have a post. He's going to have his artwork, all that stuff. We're going to shine a light on the work he's doing. So go, make sure you go follow. And again, if you're not subscribed to Kansas City Business Cast, would you kindly subscribe, like, share as you feel led, and we will see you again in season 4.